you've spoken about a time before history when men and women did something very novel, got along. And do you remember that
Oh,
time?
yeah.
Yeah,
you want me to
remember
run that riff?
Okay, would you?
It's sort of a...
But I have a question that's embedded in that, which why don't you do the riff and then I'll ask the question.
The riff has to do with I've done a lot of thinking about early human evolution and how did we make the leap so suddenly from an advanced monkey to, a poetry spouting, dreaming thing we are.
Right.
And the hidden factor, I think, is chemical acceleration agents in the environment, specifically psilocybin and other things. I mean, I'm giving you the light speed version of this. But what I said about the relationship between men and women is I think that psilocybin dissolves ego, and that the ordinary dominance hierarchies in primates, which are male dominance hierarchies, dissolved for about 100,000 years in human beings because of an item in the diet. Essentially, they were self-medicating themselves into a slightly different relationship to their psychosexuality. And instead of an ego-enforced male hegemony expressing itself as monogamy, there was some kind of polygamous, orgiastic, more egalitarian kind of organization. The reasons for thinking these kinds of things when looking at primates is we have bonobos, which are a kind of chimpanzee, and chimpanzees. Genetically, they're 98% similar, but their sexual behaviors could hardly be more different. One is very male dominant and a lot of aggression and anxiety about female behavior. The bonobos, on the other hand, are extremely loose. Many kinds of sexual activity are tolerated and so forth and so on. So it looks like in human beings, though how we express ourselves sexually is hugely important to us, it is not very tightly bound to genetics. It's more like a cultural choice. You're free to be monogamous, polygamous, heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, asexual. This is not usually the case in an animal species. And I think this flexibility about our sexual expression was an effect of the different relationship to libido that experimenting with hallucinogenic plants in the Paleolithic period induced. And it's a fun idea to play with. It sort of explains our nostalgia for a time of goddess worship, orgy, nomadism, all children and whatever minimal property there was held in common. It's a kind of anarchy, ecstasy, freedom. And it may be a myth, or it may in fact be a memory of a time. And then, of course, once the mushroom...
Paradisal beginnings.
Once the mushroom is taken out of the picture, those old bad habits, male dominance and so forth, returned with a vengeance.
Reasserted.
And that's the point in history where you get history. Walled cities, standing armies, kingship, slavery, enforced role models, subjugation of women, the whole bit.
The whole patriarchal structure.
In a sense, I think the Western phobia about drugs, about hallucinogens, about these experiences has to do with the fact that the ego is very uncertain of its role. It's not strong. It's
fragile.
It's full of fear and paranoia that it could easily be unseated. And of course, take 5 grams of psilocybin in silent darkness, and your ego will be unseated. So.
That's right. We would like to say once and for all, but it doesn't seem to go quite that way. But okay, well, thank you for that riff. I appreciate it. The question is, what has what I've wondered about in listening to you over the years, and they've been wonderful years, I'll have you know. In fact, we met originally in 1988. I was at a seminar on the subject of physical immortality where Terence was giving a talk. We were just reminiscing about that just before. What was that famous line you had for?
You're immortal as long as you live.
Voila, there we have it. What is the role, and especially since you have gotten so very involved in the I Ching, which touches so many precious elements of human life, what is the role of character, and you could say character development, in the shamanic and the psychedelic experience?
Well, it's an interesting question. I think sort of we touched on this a little bit earlier in our talk, where I talked about developing the observer of attention, that there is a developing of a sense
It's
of
like a cybernetic position, actually.
well, and a sense of proper relationship. I mean, a shaman is neither inflated nor deflated, neither excessively humble nor excessively pretentious. And humor, if someone claims to be some kind of shaman and they do not take themselves lightly, then they're probably some beetle-browed maniac of some sort going for your wallet or worse. You know, a sense of relative proportion and humor, and a sense of not the inevitability, but sort of just the power in things to unfold themselves along their own pathways. I've met a lot of shamans because I spent time in the Amazon basin, and invariably the signifying characteristic is simply a feeling of being at ease in their presence and a feeling of penetrating intelligence. It isn't that different from talking about Tibetan lamas or anyone like that. I mean, penetrating intelligence. Some people differ with me, but I really believe salvation has something to do with intelligence. It may not be the whole story.
It's not just a passing acquaintance.
Well, I was quoting, I don't know if I can get this right, but I was quoting last night John Stuart Mill to a friend of mine. John Stuart Mill said, not all conservative people are stupid, but most stupid people are conservative. I thought, amazing.
That's great. I hear what you're saying. So in terms of character development, one of the main things that you were focusing on is humor, which actually preempted one of my other questions when I told you I was sitting down and doing something very novel, I'll have you know, which was thinking of questions that I would like to ask Terence. One of the questions was, what is the role of humor in, well, not the psychedelic experience, I think that's kind of obvious, but in the shamanic experience, with that purview on life, which is pre-religious, so to speak, pre-institutional religious. What is the flavor of the life when people are so close to the earth and the plants? And is that something that you are inviting people to consider these days in 1996 now as a way for us to open up toward the transcendental object?
Well, I'm not sure I follow the entire question, but I'll try a yes.
Oh, yes. Fine. All right. Do you want me to rephrase it, or do you want to just take a stab?
Let me take a stab at it. Two human activities seem to me pretty much to be outside of history. I mean, one is orgasm and the other is laughter. And they are physiological responses to circumstance that are universal. We do it differently if we're French or Armenian or whatever. And it breaks us out of culture for a moment. And so laughter, I think, is really the shaman's greatest tool. That's why the shaman is always associated with the trickster. And in the clinches, meaning when somebody's dying or childbirth or snake bite or something, The shaman is a very serious and highly functional caregiver and technician.
Right.
But how the shaman lives with his people is as a clown and a gadfly and a critic and the guy who always says, well, don't you think we should think again? Or how about this? Or how about that? And I think that
it's a playful spirit.
It's a playful spirit, and it's a spirit that isn't dogmatic. And that's really important. These cultures are hideously dogmatic.
God, yes.
But the shaman is the one person in the culture who is deputized to make fun of it. And so I see ourselves as bohemians, as freaks, as natural critics of the society we live in, as in that sense performing a shamanic function.
Right. Okay. Good. That answers the many-pronged question that was. Right. And actually, to go a step further with that is, I remember reading something that you were writing about transpersonally oriented psychotherapists and the role that you see them playing in today's society as really being very instrumental.
Well, now there are, I don't know, thousands probably, people who I would consider shamans, who don't live in the rainforest and don't administer their skills to some tiny language group up some river, but who are fully embedded citizens of high electronic culture. And this is a new shamanism that is coming into being. We need it. Psychotherapy has been very reluctant to get its feet wet. You know, the talking therapies, and then finally the touching therapies, but very little of the taking it and going with the patient into the space kinds of therapies, because that is incredibly dangerous and demanding work. But it's what people must do if they want to work their way out of the modern dilemma.
And do you think that through ingestion, still at this point, this can help us? I mean, it doesn't mean that it has to be for everyone.
Oh no, definitely, it's not for everyone, but it's an enormous boon to our culture to revivify these shamanic hallucinogens and to bring them into the developing mix of technology and pluralism and new therapies and so forth and so on. I think it's one of the most important tools. I mean, as you well know, there is just simply nothing that effective and that dramatic for pushing you into a new world, whether you like it or not.
Sure.
And that's where we're going, whether we like it or not.
That's true too.
Yeah.
And from that point of view, you use the word and make reference to the idea of evolution. And the more I think about it, the more I think that that's a very overused and underdefined term. I'm not even sure anymore what it really is.
Well, evolution in biological terms is not in the picture anymore. We are evolving now entirely in the domain of culture. And so
culture
rapidly.
And consciousness.
Well, yes, they mirror each other. One is the byproduct of the other. But we're not changing physically. We haven't for 50,000 years.
We still have the appendix, etc.
Yes, but we are mutating our cultural values and our technologies and our institutions at such a rate that, as I say, we will not recognize ourselves in a very few years.
And of course, that's not a biological recognition, it's a psychic recognition.
Yes. I mean, imagine someone brought forward to modern New York from 100 years ago. I mean, I'm sure they would assume that, I don't know what they would assume had happened in the intervening 100 years. It looks like Armageddon or something. But it's not. It's just normal unfolding of historical processes and technology. The mushroom once said to me, "This is what it's like when a species prepares to depart for the stars. Not to worry."
Well, they've been speaking to you for a while, haven't they? Really? Long enough. We are being signaled that we are the end of time is really not in 2012, December 23rd or something like that. It's really in about 4 minutes.
See, it overtook even my expectations.
Much faster than either of us could have realized. In our closing minutes, Terence, are there any particular points that you would like to make? I mean, here we have this wonderful New York audience that is just, loving you and lapping up this show. And I'm just wondering if there's any particular central points that you would like to make, that you would like to communicate to the folks that are listening.
I think people should put the art pedal to the floor. I think our salvation is in producing as much beauty and as much communication as fast as possible. That what will make this white knuckle ride to the end of history slightly easier is if we communicate our dreams, our fears, our experience of what it's like to go through this. We've never been here before. This is a unique moment, and probably the future of the human race depends on how we comport ourselves over the next 25 years. So it's a privilege, a challenge, an adventure. Everybody should jump in and feel the surf.
Take off your seatbelt and get ready.
That's right.
Absolutely. Well, that's wonderful. In fact, I just realized on a practical note that you are beginning this Think Along tour in New York.
That's right.
As we speak.
Well, this is the most novel place.
Really? This is the place to begin. And from here, you're going to Santa Fe?
Santa Fe, then Boulder, then Los Angeles, and then right home to Hawaii.
Wonderful. Wonderful. A great place to have a home in, for a fact. Why don't we give a way for people to get in touch with Axiom? So if they want to communicate to friends in other parts of the country while you're dancing around.
Do you have the Axiom
I think I have
email address?
Not, or do I have, their phone number is 1-800-76-AXIOM.
Oh, well, that'll do it.
Okay, 1-800-76-AXIOM. And there's Robin Johnson there, so you can feel free to call to get more information on Terence's Think Along tours and as he dances across the country. We're really glad that you danced into the studio.
It was a pleasure to talk with you.
Great.
Lots of fun.
Good.
Take it easy.
Absolutely. I will, Terence. Thanks so much.